Hi, everyone, and welcome. I am Dominic de Souza, founder of Smart Catholics, and one of your co hosts for the Authentic Catholic Man show, introducing Marek Rudak and Dave DiNuzzo. Welcome, gentlemen.
Welcome, guys. So glad we're here.
And
Glad to be here with you.
Very quickly, Marek is an ex-Army Ranger, speaker, and author, and we'll have him introduce himself in a second. Dave is a Catholic husband, father of four, speaker, theology teacher, and evangelist. So these gents have gotten around. So today's topic is called Men at Arms. So before diving into all of that, I'd like us to meet Marek and Dave a little bit more personally and talk about what is the authentic Catholic man, because it's a group and it's also a show here. So, Marek, over to you. A little bit, in your history in about 2 minutes, and then we'll ask Dave.
Yeah, sure. Obviously, 2 minutes is always a stretch because there's definitely a lot of mistake and a lot of pain that went into my understanding what an authentic Catholic man is. But, if I had to describe in 2 minutes, to me, authentic Catholic man is someone who's real, someone who's honest, someone who is not hesitant to talk about the struggle. Because to me, that's kind of the ultimate test of somebody who's been there, who's been in the trenches, somebody who's fought a good fight, but is also not afraid to share those lessons. I remember growing up in the military, I really gravitated towards the officers, enlisted men who were very open about the lessons that they learned in war. That's how I learned the most. And so to me, this is a perfect way to parlay that into our growth as Catholic men, because it doesn't matter if somebody's an ex-military, somebody's an accountant, entrepreneur, minister, you name it. We all have that same goal of growing to become a better Catholic man, someone who can inspire by their example to bring people to faith, and also inspire the people around them to be better Catholic men, better Catholic followers of Christ. And so to me, that's what being authentic is being able to share that struggle, share those lessons so that we can collectively become better Catholic men as a result.
Mm-hmm. Dave, what would you say on that? And from the sense as well of, if we're going to talk about authentic Catholic men, what is an inauthentic Catholic man?
Yeah, so when it just comes down to it, a quick definition is what Marek said is that we're trying to be better. What that goal is, or what that place that we're aiming is Christ. So he was authentically masculine. One of the things that I love to do is to look at the Gospels and see all of his actions and see what virtue he was living out. And so when he was dealing with the blind man or the paralytic, or when he was talking to Pontius Pilate, or when he was dealing with Mary Magdalene, or when he was overturning the tables, whatever it was, he was acting in virtue. So I would just say that the answer to what an authentic Catholic man is a man who is striving to be like Christ in all things. And this permeates our whole life. We can't turn it on and turn it off. It has to inform every facet of our life. And that was actually a post I just made today on my Instagram that has to inform every single part of our life. So certainly that aspect that Mark was talking about when it comes to becoming better. So to answer your question then about being an inauthentic man, we often mistake that the opposite of masculinity is femininity. It is not. The opposite of masculinity is childishness. So if you're acting like a boy, if you're doing basically what feels good, what is best in your mind for you at that moment, you're acting more like an animal and less like a man. And inauthenticity is so visible. It is so noticeable. So guys might think they're fooling people, but it's written all over your life, buddy. So yeah, we need to stop being a bunch of grown boys walking around, and we need to be more like Christ, live virtue, die to self. That look at his life and the virtues that he's exhibiting, it doesn't stop when it comes to the passion. Everything he does in the passion is masculine. It's the most masculine thing that's ever happened ever. So if we can die to self, sacrifice, love, then we'll be men.
That's a fantastic definition, Dave. But I'm gonna go on a limb here, and my assumption is this is not the definition that you were born with. And so, so tell us a story, Dave. Tell us how you arrived to that definition, because I'm pretty quite sure that it's changed over time. And so I was wondering if you can tell us a story of what helped you draw that conclusion.
Yeah, great question. When I started True Manhood back in 2008, I was looking at the culture and I was seeing, what are males doing? What are the ones that are doing it well doing, and what are the ones that are doing it poorly doing? And there are so many examples of the ones that are doing it poorly. And I came up with this terminology that I call cultural manliness. And the definition is, the more power, money, sex, and stuff that a male consumes, the more manly he is. Okay, so it's the lie that the more power, money, sex, and stuff a man consumes, the more manly he is. So when I was a kid, I was built in this culture of that a man is rough and gruff and he takes what he wants. It's not given to him. He takes what he wants. So that means if it's money, he takes it. If it's power, he takes it. If it's a woman, he takes it. And that led to a life of pornography use, using women, having my mind set on the wrong thing, set on power, set on prestige, set on position. That stuff does not work. It does not last, and it is not fulfilling. And every man knows that. Every man knows that. It might be, a flash in the pan, like, ooh, that felt good. But then what? So yeah, I lived that way for a long time. Thankfully, I had good, actual authentic men around me that said, hey, look, you can't do this, And so being raised in being able to watch whatever I wanted, playing video games. I'm a staunch believer that that's a gigantic waste of your time, and it's actually hurting your soul.
Right.
It's addictive. It's really not that much different than pornography. And actually some of the games do have pornography in them. Yeah. And it just creates us to be so self-indulgent and not willing to sacrifice. So Mark, I'd be interested in this. I'll turn the tables on you. When you're in battle and you're next to guys that are living this cultural manliness, do you really believe that they're going to lay down their life for their friend when they're right next to you? I mean, I'd just be interested. I mean, that's a hard question, because you have to trust them because you don't have any other choice. So just curious. Well,
the interesting thing is, when I was in the Army, I was a totally different person. The ironic thing is that, especially as I look at my time in the military, we were all screwed up on many levels, because we kind of bought into that definition of manhood. For example, one of the most common things to do when you reported to infantry unit was to get a tattoo. And when on the weekends you go to a strip club and drink. And, that was a definition of manhood that we subscribed to. But the interesting thing is that when the bullets started flying, people would actually step up, and I think that the reason for that is because when bullets start flying, it's very clear, what the important things are. It's very clear. But the unfortunate thing is that it's typically it happens in those moments. But when you are out of that danger, then the complacency kind of steps in, and then it kind of gives to a lot of people an excuse to drink more, to numb things out, because now all of a sudden, it shows that we can step up when it's important. And so because of that, we're owed to have these pleasures in our lives. But unfortunately, the thing with these pleasures is that, however pleasureful they are, it's never enough. It's never enough. So, with pornography, I watched porn for, oh my goodness, 20 plus years. And I mean, I hate to say it. I mean, I just kept watching weirder and weirder and weirder crap. I mean, there was nothing illegal, but having said that, if I kept watching it, I can kind of understand how people get to these illegal things, because it's just never enough. And it just, you just need more and more to get that high, to be able to feel the emotions that you want to feel, because quite frankly, you're hiding something else. So for example, in my case, it was an abusive grandfather that destroyed my confidence. And so in my mind is that I stepped up in in war, which I did. But unfortunately, that was just a snapshot, and it didn't set me up to look at the totality of manhood. Just like you mentioned, Dave, is that example of Christ, is that it's not only what happens on the battlefield. The battlefield is a small portion of your life. What's more important is how you show up on every day in your everyday life that brings you either closer to God or pushes you away from God.
Yeah, it's interesting. You brought up two things that stuck out to me. One was that you watch weirder and weirder things that you said that I go for more and more and more. And what's so ironic is that it's so much less and so much less and so much less. And we become so downtrodden, we just feel so empty. But I would counter that with the second thing, which you said earlier, in regards to these guys that they're living out this cultural manliness. They're doing these things when they're not in the heat of battle, but when they are in the heat of battle, there is something that is written on the man's heart. It's inside of us, guys. It is in us to be a defender, to be a protector, to go out and lead, and when I know we're going to get into this, talking about some spiritual warfare, I love to look at the example of David. He is so confident. He's a teenager at this point. He's so confident. He's like, look, the lion and the bear came, and I just grasped it, and I struck it, and I killed it because the Lord was with me. And if we go into whatever the battle is, and we know that, we can't deny that it's written on our hearts. That's what the culture wants to tell us, that it's not, that we're worthless, that the only thing we're good enough for is strip clubs and gambling and video games and being a loser. And we're worth so much more than that.
Before we dive into the some of those initial questions for today's topic, Mark, I actually want to ask you the question: was there a person, or is there a story where you began to get that understanding of like authentic manhood, and it started turning you around? What was that, a person, or do you remember any of that?
Oh, you're asking me or Dave?
Yes, sorry, you, Marek, because we got Dave, so I'm curious about your answer now.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Can you repeat the question? Because I assumed that it was Dave.
So was there a point in your life, was there a story or a moment where you began to just become, you had this growing dissatisfaction that you talked about? Was there a person or a moment that just changed how you saw what it meant to be a man? What's that story?
Well, kind of the simplest one. There was a lot of moments, but like the one that really brought it home for me was my divorce. And long story short is that by that time I felt like I did all the right things. I was a veteran, made a lot of money, I had a house, I had a beautiful wife. But guess what? My ex-wife cheated on me and left me for her boss. And that was such a big slap in the face, that it made me realize that all these things that I've done not only did not give me satisfaction, but also brought me to my lowest low. And as painful as it was exactly what I needed to start that walk back to Christ, because it made it very painfully obvious for me that these worldly pleasures, these worldly accomplishments, they're all only mean so much. It's that the foundation is very unstable, and all it takes is a snap of a finger for it to fall apart. And so that was the moment for me to realize that, hey, whatever I thought was good is a whole bunch of crap, and I need to start looking for something deeper. And that's what brought me back in my relationship with Christ.
I think you mentioned earlier too that I think your grandfather shot your confidence growing up.
Yes. So so with me,
I don't want to probe if you don't feel comfortable, but I'm curious as who you replaced him with, like in your mind. And I know that we talk about Christ. Could you make that feel real, especially for viewers who are still early in our faith journeys? And how did you replace that? Because that's kind of a father wound, or a sort of childhood wound there.
Right.
How did you resolve that one?
Yeah, so initially I resolved it by accomplishments. I felt like, hey, if I go to West Point, graduate top of my class, go to Ranger School, then I finally feel confidence. But it's the thing about it is, yes, it kind of like with this porn or alcohol, you get that high initially, but it doesn't last. But there was always something else to look forward to. Well, there's like, civilian career, marriage, but guess what? Like the marriage was kind of like a culmination of it, and it all fell apart. And then so for me, that was very painful, but it really made brought it home to me that whatever I was doing wasn't working. And so through me, like by getting back to Christ, by following the church's teachings, by cleaning up my act, I slowly opened up my heart to really experience the goodness of God. And the more I experienced of God, the more I wanted more of that experience, and the more it encouraged me to clean up my act. For example, porn, masturbation, theology of the body. And the more I followed those teachings, the more I experienced God, the more I realized what truly matters in my life. And to me, the more I experience what it means to be a truly authentic Catholic man.
I just want to jump in here. I think it's important. All of us need healing of some kind. We need it due to our sinfulness as humans, but certainly by the choices that we've made. We need healing, and I think that's hard for a lot of us to come to grips with, because we're men and we're self-reliant and we just do our own thing. And if I can get a bunch of stuff done, then I'll be fine. And I'm actually working through this. I've been faithful for a long time. I can say decades now. I've been faithful for a long time, but I still fail. And I've just recently realized, wow, I actually probably do need some healing from a lot of things. And I think it's okay for us to tell the men that all of us, we have a hole. And my wife uses this description in her counseling practice. She says, everyone has a hole, and we fill it with sand. And our sand might be porn, it might be prostitutes, it might be gambling or drinking or drugs, or it might be work, it might be golf, whatever. We just fill these holes with sand and just put more and more and more stuff in. And then if we feel like if we just put more stuff in the hole, then finally we'll be fulfilled. And actually that sand just seeps out, and we feel more and more empty and more empty if we're filling it with the wrong thing. What we need is a strong foundation. Realize the hole is there. We need healing. And the firm foundation is what we can then build our life around. It's like you don't build a house on top of sand. You build it with a firm foundation. You build it on the rock. So those biblical principles, like they work. They're real. But I think, even for myself, last month I went on a retreat and I just had an epiphany of, wow, I actually do need healing, and I need to let Christ in there. So, whether it's a grandfather, a dad, a teacher, a coach, a brother, whatever, or just the hole is because none of them were there. You didn't have anybody in your life. Whatever it is, we all have something.
I think this is a massive point that I think it's growing, it's gaining in attention. But the more that I'm, learning about like mental health and trauma and how that, affects you and whatever, beginning to realize it's not a matter of if somebody has some kind of trauma. It's just a matter of how much. And this is one of the reasons why this group personally excites me. And I'm kind of a fly on the wall in these conversations here. It's because it's a matter of how much, and then how do I start finding out where I'm weak? And that's the first step in humility, is recognizing I don't have all the answers. Let's show up and ask and chat with other gents. So let's turn to the theme for this month. And what excites me about this is because of both your backgrounds. Dave, as a first responder yourself, like actually, do you ever go into a burning building, Dave? Or at least you showed up for people in medical emergencies? Both? Yes.
So burning buildings, burning farm ground. Or showing up to wrecks and different things.
And then Marek, yourself, a veteran of two wars. So let's talk about this, men at arms. What is that? What does that mean to be on a battlement? What are we at arms against it? Each other? Marek, why don't you go ahead and introduce this? Let's dig in.
Yeah, sure. So probably the simplest way for me to explain it, kind of going back to our theme, it's that spiritual aspect. because a lot of times we focus on the what, like what's happening, but we don't peel back the onion to find out what's underneath it. And another problem that I see very commonly is that we assume that we have to have all the answers, because if not, then we'll be perceived as weak. And so to me, kind of like the simplest way to explain that is to understanding that spiritual component and understanding that there is no way we can handle on our own. And that's why we need Savior. That's why we need Jesus. And the kind of like the most basic way it plays out is through temptation. Especially like I remember when I was growing in my faith, I mean, I was falling into a lot of temptation, and obviously these temptations don't go away, but I'm a lot better at handling them because I learned to reach out to God, to leverage the power of prayer to help me through those temptations. And that's what helps me to strengthen my character. And by no means am I a perfect person. I still fall, but where I look at where I am today versus 5 years, especially 10 years ago, it's at a place that I never thought was possible. And even while there's still a lot more growth, it's tremendous to where I've been able to grow, and I derive a lot of satisfaction from being able to overcome these difficulties, because that's what builds character. And so it really comes back to understanding how much of our lives is spiritual warfare, and understanding that there's no way we can handle it, and that's exactly the point, because that's what turns us to Christ.
Yeah, I'm going to add in there that when we are feeling weak about ourselves, whether it's perception or whether it's truth, whether we're giving into sin or not, the devil wants to put in barriers. The barriers are often self-made barriers that we place on ourselves, but the devil wants to get in there, and he wants to root out any possibility of hope. Yeah. He wants to root out any possibility of a better option. And that's where the spiritual warfare really comes in. It starts, it's really in our own minds and in our own hearts, because a lot of us play mind games with ourselves. Like, look, I did this thing. This thing is unredeemable. Or this happened to me. Look, I'm trash. And the mental will, like the mental volleyball we play with ourselves. I'm good. No, I'm bad. No, I'm good. No, I'm bad. Or I'm bad. No, I'm worse. It's so dangerous, because the devil will capitalize on these things. He will try to capitalize on them, and he's going to come after us. So maybe, guys, we could give some ideas of things, like practical things to actually do, because I think this is probably resonating with any man who's watching. If we're real with ourselves, we know that our pasts are not we know our pasts are not the way we want to live. And that might be earlier today. A guy might come across this, and he might have, any number of things. And it could have been 10 years ago. It could have been 20, 30, 40 years ago. But maybe some practical ideas of how to fight this spiritual warfare.
Yeah, sure. I can kick it off. To me, it's really comes down to having weapons, And so to me, the main weapon is prayer. For example, with me is that kind of going back to the theme of Dave of like healing. There's no such thing as complete healing. So yes, I've been healed of porn. I've been healed of alcohol. I've been healed of masturbation. But I tell you, my kind of like next best frontier is pride. I obviously I've made a lot of progress, but pride is something that I'm working on. And so to me, like the main thing that I feel is helping is every morning I pray the litany of humility. And I tell you, every morning I read through it and I'm like, oh my goodness, is this really what I want? Is this really what I want? But that's exactly what that's exactly why I know that I need to keep praying. And so to me, like kind of the number one weapon is prayer. And wherever possible, like think about the prayer that is best suited for that particular situation. So if in doubt, obviously rosary is great. There's a lot of wonderful prayers, but wherever possible, I really encourage you to think about maybe like a saint or a prayer that is specifically targeted at that particular sin that you combat. For example, like when I was dating my wife, Jessie, we made intention of following through on theology of the body. And so obviously, like I was in my late 30s. this is not how I did business before. And so, like, you know, what I remember praying to Saint Maria Goretti, you know, and I feel that's what helped me to persevere. And so to me, it's number prayer, and wherever possible, finding that particular saint or prayer that is targeted at the particular sin that you're fighting. I don't know. What about you, Dominic?
Well, actually, I want to sort of kick back and ask you to drill a little bit more into that, because prayer is it's the first weapon in your holster. But when it doesn't work, right? And I'm sure plenty of the gents watching this and myself, more times than I can count, something's going on. I start trying to pray a prayer, and I don't feel a change. I don't see a difference. The temptation I'm going through or the bad situation isn't changing. So what should I expect from a situation? And let's say I say a prayer, then what?
So I guess it's over to me, because Dave, are you still there?
Dave, I think we've lost you. Try and refresh, and we'll bring you back on.
So hopefully Dave will be back soon. So to me, it's if prayer doesn't work, here's just a couple.
Not that it doesn't work. It's like, what should our expectation be around like saying a prayer?
Well, it's that's kind of an interesting thing, because it's that I see it all the time, especially with teenagers who pray and nothing happens right away. And to me, the most important thing then is patience. Not having kind of this prosperity approach to prayer that things will happen right away. Is that trust that things will happen on their own timeline. For example, like with me, kind of like pornography as a prime example, it took me years to quit porn. But once I did, I'm so glad I did. And there were a lot of points for me to that I thought it would never happen. And in fact, when I was actually able to quit, I never, to this day, I don't know, like the day I was able to quit porn, because I thought I would be tempted back into it. And so to me, it's having that patience, and also having ways to help you deal with that sense of hopelessness. And so, for example, for me, like what's super helpful is going to adoration, is that in those times where I feel like things are not working, is just spending time with God, and being next to the body of Christ is always very helpful for me to be able to put things in perspective. And whenever things are not going well, just me being in that moment with Jesus, not really knowing what to say, but just being there, being present, makes all the difference to me. So that's what I would say is the most helpful thing is adoration. And also another thing that I found very helpful is having that kind of like band of brothers, somebody that you can talk to. Because the thing about it is, and I see all the time as a coach, and because most of the coaching is secular, but a lot of the times it's not so much that you have a solution, but just having the ability to talk things out is priceless. Because what happens is that until we talk things out, things are in our minds. Like the way our brains work is that negative thoughts have 4 times as much charge as positive thoughts. And so that means is that you can do 10,000 things right, but then you do one thing wrong, and that's all you can focus on. And so the typical thing that happens whenever we're having negative thoughts, we try to like run away from them, stuff them down. But being able to talk them out, articulate them, whether it's in a group of people or maybe by writing it out, is super powerful, because it doesn't change anything, no. But just by you articulating thing, it takes the power away from whatever it is that is bothering you or making you feel ashamed.
I agree. Looks like Dave's still joining us. So that point there about one, obviously having a band of brothers, and hey, that's why we're trying to build this group. But having somebody, having a priest, a friend, a father, somebody to talk to, and I think it is a massive issue with a lot of these very sensitive topics. And we don't really have a culture around the world where men are encouraged to actually talk about what's going on inside us. What are you tamp it down, you get the job done, and our lives are built around that. And basically our hearts go to die inside, because when you never actually talk about this stuff, never actually figure out what is affecting you, what's playing on you, what programs are basically running in the background, you're never going to make headway. And this is, I kind of want to come back and I want to keep drilling you on this question about prayer here, because it's so important. I remember growing up, I would be hit by some temptation, like to porn or whatever. And I would, you described earlier, you got one of those rowing machines.
Mhm.
exercise. That's how I would feel. I'm in I don't know what those things are called, but I'm like, I'm going to push through this and
Yeah.
I'm not going to fall. And it would be hell. And I remember one day where as a kid, I felt like I pulled through under my own steam, and then I fell the next day.
Mhm.
And that has continued to be the pattern ever since. Whenever there's a problem, is I try to do it under my own steam. I can tough this out because, well, I'm a man,
Yeah.
I do this stuff, God wants me to be a good guy, so I'm gonna do that. But isn't that actually the problem? And I like the fact you talked about pride earlier. Isn't that attitude actually part of the problem, and why it sets us up to fall again later on? What do you think about that? And how can we start to, what is the new kind of program, the new kind of thinking we got to put in place there?
Yeah, so to me, probably like the best way to characterize that is it's the act of surrender. Oh, welcome back, Dave. Yeah, we
Thanks.
need
Sorry
to,
about that.
we need to give some time back to Dave. But well, why don't we just turn over to Dave? I kind of feel bad that Dave is our guest and he probably like spoke the least. we're being very bad questioners. But I guess Dominic, do you want to ask that question to Dave again?
Yeah, or both of you just chime in. So here's we've talked about when you're in a state of temptation, you turn to prayer, obviously. Now, one question we'll follow up with, what do you do before you're in that state? What do you need to start doing to not fall into it as easily? We'll get to that in a second. But once you're in it and you sort of said the prayer and then nothing's really changed and you're still in this situation, do you try to muscle through it? What do you do? Because in my personal case, I would try to say a prayer and then I would probably keep right on doing exactly what I was doing and hope that it would sort of blow away and sort of muscle my way through the problem. And then I would end up falling like inevitably anyway. And later on, I began to realize, it's because I'm trusting in my own pride. And there's a reason why the armor of God isn't something you go and make. It's something you get. So maybe unpack that, for guys watching this and for myself and so on. What was I doing wrong? And yes, I turned to prayer, but that didn't save me immediately. So what was kind of going on? What are the programs kind of running along inside me that I'm not aware of, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's a complex scenario. I think there are many aspects to the answer. One is, if we're caught in habitual prayer, we should treat this like an addiction. So some men are addicted to alcohol. Mm-hmm. They are addicted to drugs. Many men are addicted to pornography. Some are addicted to a lot of things. We need to understand that these are actually a chemical response that our body is having. So, for instance, let's use methamphetamines. So a person takes methamphetamines one time, their brain can get hooked, and they are a full-blown addict from hit number one. And what's occurring in the brain is that the body is having the stimulus, certain brain chemicals are being released, and it causes a reaction. You have that reaction, and then you come down from that reaction, and there's a dependency in your body, and that's what causes a cyclical addiction. Same thing with the alcohol. Now, here's what happens with something like pornography. I, unfortunately, am an expert on pornography and pornography addiction. This is not something that I went to school for, unless it's called the School of Hard Knocks of years and years and years. I was first exposed at age 10, and I really think that at age 10, it was the same thing for the meth user. One hit, and I was addicted, and I'm still in recovery now. I'm a porn addict now, the same way that an alcoholic is always an alcoholic. If they go back to that bar, they go back to the bottle, they're going to have the same response of the brain. So what happens in pornography is we become aroused in some way, either, older guys that would have first found pornography on the internet through using AOL, when AOL was really the only way to get online.
That was me.
The dialing sound of the modem trying to connect. The young guys listening to this are like, what are you talking about? Everyone who knows that sound, but that could be a trigger for the brain to be like, oh, hey, the hit's coming. And some guys, it's not internet. Maybe it's a magazine. For me, when I was a kid, I think probably Mark, this is probably the same. They were sending Victoria's Secret magazine to my home as like a 12-year-old. Of course I liked it. I mean, look at the most beautiful women in the world in their underwear. Like this is a problem. So for guys, their triggers are all kinds of things. Some guys it's memory. Some guys it's the browser. Some guys it's their laptop or their cell phone. Some guys it's a room they're in. Some guys it's the shower. Okay. Yeah. There's trigger points everywhere. But what's happening is I'm not using trigger like I'm woke or like, I'm a flake. What I'm saying is things trigger these brain chemicals. So then our brain believes that the next fix is coming. So there's this dependency that has occurred. Now the hit is starting. My brain is releasing brain chemicals, testosterone. Okay, I mentioned earlier about the video games. And one of the reasons why I really think that video games are not that much different from porn is that you're living in a false reality. You're in this, like anybody who has played a video game, and after they've played it for 10 minutes, an hour, 3 hours, whatever amount of time they've wasted, and they find themselves sweaty, it's because your body thinks, your brain thinks, oh, I'm the guy running down the field in Madden catching the touchdown. I'm the guy in Call of Duty or Halo that's actually the sniper. I'm the guy who's getting the pimp in Grand Theft Auto. So our body is responding physically because it's in this false reality. This is the same thing that happens in porn. So the brain chemicals are being released, and then there's the arousal, and then the action of the porn, the masturbation, the orgasm. What's occurring is bonding agents are being released. Okay, so oxytocin, for instance, is released in the sexual act. Well, when the sexual act is with the false reality that's on the screen or a video or a picture, this messes us up. This messes us up seriously bad. So back to your question. What do we do about this? When we're in it, change your brain chemistry. That's what you need to do. Okay, so just go in there and just fix it, man. Okay, you can't. I can't. What we have to do is actually remove ourselves from the situation. Okay, if you're addicted to going to the strip club, that's a lot different. Just, don't go. Put a GPS tracker on your phone and let your best friend know what that tracker is, and they can always see where you went. And then you have to answer it, or give it to your grandma. Grandma, this is where I'm going. But if you're in like pornography, for instance, or alcohol, to get yourself up and out of that, to rely on your own strength is not going to work. It might work once, it might work for a month, it might work for a year, but it's not going to work long term because we are weak. We are weak. And the devil knows our soft spots, like I mentioned earlier, and he's going to attack us in those ways. And because the brain is super powerful, it has a lot of power over us when it's doing the bad things. So what we need to do is take the steps necessary to recalibrate the brain and let the brain power actually lead us to where we need to go in a good sense. So for instance, on my website, truemanhood.com, there is a free download of what I call the 5-step plan. Okay, this is not a foolproof plan. This is not going to get everybody out of their addiction or whatever, but it hopefully could help. So the first step is admit that you have a problem. So it could be any kind of sin. Maybe it's like Mark said about being prideful. Okay, maybe you're not looking at porn. Maybe you're not drinking alcohol. I've never been drunk in my life, so I don't understand the alcoholism, but I understand the porn addiction. But it could be whatever it is for anybody. So admitting that there's a problem, we would then automatically understand that hopefully there's a solution. Okay, so admitting that you have a problem. The second step is don't just want to fix the problem, work to fix the problem. When Jesus healed people with an affliction, okay, those afflictions in the scriptures are representative of sinfulness. He always gave them something to go and do. Go to the priest, tell them this, and go and sin no more. Pick up your mat and walk. Whatever the thing was, he always gave them something to do. And that's what we also need to do, is realize that I'm going to have to put the work in for this. I can't stay in that old place. I can't stay in that old addiction cycle. I have to get out of it. Okay. So then steps 3, 4, and 5 are really where the work happens, and they kind of go together. Step 3 is find an accountability partner. Okay. So I'll get on these video calls. I'll get on these radio programs. I'll go to these men's conferences, and I will literally tell every man, okay, I've told this to tens of thousands of men. Today, if you don't know who your accountability partner is, you can contact me, dave@truemanhood.com. I am not leaving you alone, brother. You are not alone. You are my brother. I love you, and I'm willing to be your accountability partner until we can identify the guy in your life who is supposed to be the right man. But everybody's got to have accountability. If you don't have accountability and you're trying to fly solo, it's not going to work. Okay, connected to Marek in the military. There's not one job in the military that's by themselves. The sniper has the spotter. Okay, the helicopter has the gunner. There's never a job where it's just lone wolf. They don't exist because they don't work. Okay, so find an accountability partner. This is super key. Step 4 is to make a plan. So you were asking, okay, I'm in the sin. What do I do? And what do I do beforehand? Well, you don't do it. You don't create a plan when you're in the heat of the moment. You create the plan when you're of sober mind. And this means you're working with a confessor. You have a regular confessor. This is not your accountability partner. This is somebody different. If you have a spiritual director, you're working with them, and your best buddy. Your best buddy loves you. He might not say, hey, dude, I love you. If you're my buddy, I tell my buddies that I love them, because I understand that love is Jesus on the cross, and I'm really literally willing to die for them. So in your plan, you figure out what are those things that are creating that addictive cycle. What's churning you up? What's getting you going? Why are you falling into the sin over and over and over? Why is that failure in your life? And what are you going to do about it? So, like, for instance, I do have an opportunity to change the brain chemistry. If I get something that triggers me, and I can notice, I know that feeling. Everybody knows that feeling about their addictive sin. You know when you're getting ready to give into it. Okay? It's like in baseball. If you're up to bat and if there's been no pitches, it's even playing ground. No balls, no strikes. But you start getting strikes on the count, you got to change up your stance. You got to change up, you choke up on the bat, shorten your swing. Don't hit for power, hit for, opposite field, whatever. The further down in the count you go, the less likely you're going to do what you need to do. So in that immediate instant of knowing, oh, okay, here it comes, then you have to put your plan into place. So you can actually take that testosterone that's racing through your brain and do some push-ups, do some sit-ups, jumping jacks, burpees, go outside. Okay. I've always said this to guys. If you're looking at your, the terrorist in your pocket and you're doing it alone in your dorm room, go out in the hallway, go out in the street. Okay. You're not going to masturbate in the middle of the street. If you are, you got serious issues, but so you can change those things in your brain, but it takes time. It takes your accountability partner saying, tell me how today was. Tell me where you were tempted. Tell me what you did about it. Why did you give in? Today, why didn't you give in? What was the prayer that you prayed? And you begin to change your whole life. You begin to change every aspect. But if you rely on yourself to do this, it's not going to work. Okay, and that's where step number 5 comes in. It's probably step number 1 is probably the most important, and that's living a life of prayer and sacrament. So if you're not living a life of prayer and sacrament, you've got to start today. So if you have not been in the confessional, guys, I'm just going to say it. If you haven't been in the confessional in the last month, figure it out. Figure it out in the next 24 hours. Call a priest. Go. This COVID stuff that, the priest isn't available, find a priest who's available. They're around you. Figure it out. They are there. Get in the confessional, okay? The idea that you have to go once a year, bad news. For guys that are especially in these cycles, you need it maybe weekly. early on, you might need it more regularly than that. That's why having a regular confessor is so important. So living a life of sacrament. So going to confession, having that penance, doing the penance, really honestly saying the act of contrition that I am going to stay clear of sin, right? That's how we're forgiven, that we're actually planning to go out and not sin anymore. And then staying close to the Eucharist, daily mass, getting to mass, and then the devotions through prayer. So mental prayer, pray the hours, pray, do spiritual reading. It takes so much effort to do these very, very simple things because our lives have weeded them out. These easy, simple things to do, our lives get so busy. So go to bed earlier, get up earlier, spend time in prayer. And if you're living all these steps, so these 5 steps, once you do step 1 and step 2, they're done. Now you might need to come back to them if you've given up, if you've quit, if it hasn't worked for you. Steps 3, 4, and 5, find a partner, make a plan, live prayer and sacrament. Now, this also in your plan might include going to a therapist. It needs to include when you're going to go to confession, when you're going to, get spiritual direction, when you're going to therapy, when you're going to your AA meeting. When, there's probably guys that are listening to this that have SSA, same-sex attraction. When are you going to your courage meeting? When are you doing your Bible study? This is all part of your plan. It's like a plan for life. When are you praying? What are you praying? When are you fasting? And you begin to do this. Now, if you're a husband, all of this bad behavior has to stop today. It has to stop today because your sacrament, that is your wife, okay, she is also a place that deserves the best. Like, you're not going to go receive the Eucharist if you're in a state of mortal sin. You shouldn't be making love to your wife if you're in the state of mortal sin. That's sacrament. That's grace. You can't just have both. And you can't forgive yourself. You have to go to the priest who's in persona Christi. And those prayers you cannot miss every day. And an act of contrition at night after you've examined your conscience. I mean, this is like 5 minutes in the morning, a 20-minute rosary in the daytime, going to mass 30 minutes for daily mass, going to confession once a week. That's 10, 20 minutes. I mean, if it's a regular confessor, maybe a little longer. This is like basic, but we fool ourselves to think that I can get myself out of my addiction. I can get myself out of whatever the problem is. We can't. So go to Christ, rely on him, know you need healed, know that your brain is messed up. My brain is still messed up because of all these years of this bad stuff. It doesn't have to stay that way, though. And then the accountability, man. So reach out. Anybody who needs it, dave@truemanhood.com, email me, and I will offer you accountability because you're not alone. You might feel alone today, and that's what a lot of guys feel, but they're not. So I'll get out off my soapbox.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you.
Mark,
I mean,
maybe
I
you
can
can
definitely relate to a lot of those points. For example, for me, like my triggers for porn masturbation was stress, and then my trigger for alcohol was just not being comfortable in social situations. And I definitely agree with, if you don't plan to succeed, you definitely plan to fail. So that's a fantastic list. And as we wrap up, Dave, you mentioned truemanhood.com. I was wondering if you can just kind of talk us briefly about what it is and what are your plans for the future?
Sure. So truemanhood.com, it's just my website that there's a lot of resources there. You could look up topical things and blog posts from years and years and years. There's some podcasts there. There's some videos, but also some resources available. There's a couple downloads that are free. More stuff is coming. I'm writing some ebooks. I'm creating some courses that are going to be launching, and the website will be launching as well. And hopefully, if there's anybody out there that's on Instagram, it's at True Manhood Men's Ministry, kind of long. Somehow somebody has truemanhood.com. I don't understand how I can't have that one. But I post some, just encouragement and life stuff there. So please give a follow, and you can reach out to me there as well. DM me there, and yeah. You can also search my name and it'll bring up stuff. But I'm not the skating photographer in Pittsburgh.
Oh yeah, that's the other
same name, but different guys.
In the last couple of minutes here, I actually want to throw one more question on the board here. Dave, or Marek, Dave, you outlined a phenomenal list of kind of lifetime or life things that you do to help stay in shape, basically, stay on the tried and true and so on. But before you would ever commit to that sort of thing, you have to start having a fresh, like you have to realize, I need to do this because I want something else out of my life. I can't continue doing what I'm currently doing. And it's like you said, when you're sober is when you want to create that plan. So I want to ask both of you. Let's say I'm a young person. Let's say I'm older, and I recognize I can't keep doing what I'm doing. I'm dissatisfied. Where do I look to sort of to get that inspiration, or what do I need to start doing to get that inspiration? You know, if either I recognize, like you said, there's addictions that can work on you, and we get into these things. These are habitual situations that rewire brain chemistry and hormones. So that's one thing that can be working on you. The other, like Mark pointed out earlier, is wounds from dads, other men, other people, moms, and so on. That can sort of be a program working on you from the inside. When you realize you're tired of it all, you want to change. Now what? So that you can start doing all of the wonderful stuff that you outlined.
Yeah, I would run to Christ. I'd drop on my knees and run to Christ, because he is the answer. We all know that when we live the way that we've always lived, we're going to get the same results we've always gotten, which is unfulfilled, which is hurt, which is feelings of just lacking. A sinful life is wrought with additional problems. I mean, it's like it perpetuates, and it just creates more and more issues. So to literally hit your knees and pray a prayer of surrender, you could literally just say, Jesus, I need you. I don't know what to do. And just, I want you. Can you help me? Please send your spirit. You know, if you're confirmed, if you're baptized and confirmed, you have the spirit in you. He's there to help you already. It's like a Christmas gift that somebody gave you. Unwrap the dang thing and utilize the gift. You know, you are given the gift of knowledge. You're given the gift of courage. You're given the gift of also so many things that will help us. So that life of prayer, just say, Jesus, I want to be like intimately connected to you, but I don't know how to do it. And then, you know, like on my site, I've got some resources. I've got some books that you could certainly read. Find some other men, go to confession. I mean, these things are like, yes, they're just a plan for life, but that's literally what you do. But also, like, stop going to the strip club, stop going to Pornhub.com, stop going to the alcohol store. You know, stop hanging out with nasty friends. If you've got nasty friends, you need to find some authentic friends. So you're not going to find them in the places that you've been looking. So go to mass, find the other people that are like, Lord, I need you. I surrender my life to you. And then they're like looking for you while you're looking for them. And then, you know, you can actually find people.
Mark,
that's a fantastic list. And just to kind of like add a little bit to what Dave said, is I like to kind of underscore that aspect of community. And I just see it all the time. I saw it in the military, but also in my local CrossFit gym. I mean, like, it's just amazing what people can achieve if you're in the right community, that the community that supports each other, that encourages each other. So I really encourage you to get yourself in some kind of a men's group. And if you don't know one or don't have one locally, please definitely join our group on smartcatholics.com, Authentic Catholic Men. We love to have you. It's a super supportive community. We're not the kind of people that, bash on Father James Martin or the Pope or whoever. We are there to support each other and each other grow, to actually do something that that we can make a difference in, which is our own lives. So if you're looking for a super supportive community and can think of one, please definitely join ours. We'd love to have you. Authentic Catholic Men at smartcatholics.com.
Thank you, Marek. And then for those who are watching this, I'm going to imagine that you've got other questions, or maybe you would have liked to have asked a question differently. So you're welcome to please come and join us in the group, and you can post your question. You can tag Marek if you'd like him to answer for you, or you can jump in there and you can send us a private message. Dave has already shared his email, dave@trueman.com. Send him your questions. You can also send Marek a direct message if you're not comfortable sharing it publicly in the group. And of course, you're welcome to do that to me as well, because that's what this group is here for. We're all trying to figure this out together. Hey, your next questions could be part of the next episode, which we'll work on next month. And this is what's cool about this group. every week, Marek is working on a different thing, whether it's a video replay from HeroicMen.com. Speaking of which, this episode is sponsored by Heroic Men. We should have led with that.
We need to add a logo.
Absolutely amazing at supporting us and building to get this amazing free library of phenomenal stuff, videos, inspiration, courses, and so on for Catholic men all over the world. So HeroicMen.com, please check them out. But we'll be featuring 2 of them. Marek will, throughout the month, we'll have a live AMA, Ask Marek Anything, just a chat, get together. It's very informal, ask your questions and so on. And then 1 week out of the month, we'll have this, a live show, which we'll then share in the group after it's done. So again, if you have questions, come and join us in the group. You can message us directly. We'd love to have a shot at answering them. And again, Marek, maybe there's another discussion we can then have here. How do we kind of use this group to help be that kind of accountability sort of thing? Maybe there's a way that we can figure that out together.
Yeah.
All righty. Thanks, Dave. Thank you, Marek. I feel like we could have gone for another hour because we just kind of loosened up with this first hour. But let's continue it in the group. Have an amazing rest of your week, gentlemen.
Thank you. God bless you guys.
God bless.